So after thinking about everybody's experiment, obviously I was left with my own. Now remember, when this whole thing started, I was initially going to do the sleep deprivation. But at the last second, a couple of days before actually it all started, Mary Beth said, you shouldn't do that because you're narcoleptic as fuck anyways. So there's just no way you can kind of keep an eye on everything and do everything that you want to do, while being sleep deprived. And she was right. And that ended up playing such an incredible role. And I'll talk in a minute why that was so important to everything. But when I started my experiment, if you remember, I just went into it exactly as I was. Somebody who had spent a lifetime wanting to go to Chillingham Castle and investigate that incredible structure. If you're not familiar with the history of Chillingham Castle, the most obvious thing to point out about it is that it was the castle built by King Edward Longshanks. Longshanks was the king who actually tracked down, captured, and quartered William Wallace. If this sounds familiar, it should. That's the movie Braveheart, and this was a real individual. Chillingham Castle was actually constructed not to only torture the Scottish adults, but specifically it was captured to torture the children of the Scots, as this was a measure of warfare they wanted to instill, because the thought was, we want to make the Scottish army as terrified as possible. And what is more, scary than the thought of losing your life in battle? Well, the thought that's more terrifying than that is that you may live to see your children tortured. And this is where obviously John Sage came in. This horrific man and his ghost that is said to wander the castle. Now what's crazy about John Sage is, it depends on who you ask, but it's argued that roughly half, like 50% of the medieval torture devices were created by John Sage at Chillingham Castle, in which he used children to basically test them on. So the history there, from a ghost hunting standpoint, is thick. Not only that, there's physical human remains there. Like I said, there's that long oubliette, which is basically like a tall chimney, and at the bottom of it are just these spikes, and they would just drop people on these spikes where they would hit them and they would just be left there to rot. If you shine a flashlight down the oubliette, you will see the bones stacked up. Now, a lot of them are just dust to this point, but they're still bone chips and stuff. So my point being, from a ghost hunting standpoint, there's few places on planet Earth that would have that kind of allure. So going into it, that was, obviously my only thought. What I really, really hoped would happen is that there would be a major piece of evidence that we captured. Now, right away during my investigation, things started happening. Breaths, footsteps, knocking sounds, pressure on items, seeing shadow people out of the corner of your eye. In fact, so many things happened that during the edit, I actually ended up cutting out pieces of evidence just because, I always got to consider what the viewer will think. And I'm thinking, if I include everything that happened during my investigation, no one's going to believe it, just because there was so much. And it was from the jump, like right away. Like the second I walked into that dungeon, it started right away. And I wasn't at it very long, maybe 2 hours, maximum. And things were happening over and over and over again. But I did have that feeling that I'm going to get what I want, that something big is coming. And I kept being drawn back to the chapel. Now remember, at that time, I didn't know what the chapel was, because the whole thing looks chapel-y to me, you know? It all just looks like one big medieval church inside. I mean, it's just incredible. I mean, the windows, the way they're shaped, all the decor. I suppose I should have known it was the chapel by the fact that there was actual pews in there, but in the dark, they didn't register as pews to me. They just registered as seats, I guess. I should have been, I guess, more attentive to detail, but I wasn't. And once I returned to the chapel for the last time, which was the last area that I was going to go to again, which was the third time that I had went there, this was my final, I guess you could say, run during my investigation before I called it. And not only that, it was down to like 5 minutes left. When you see me say, I'm provoking John Sage, and I'm saying, you're going to be, I don't know how things were handled in the 12th or 13th century, but if you were alive today, after doing what you did to children, you would be somebody's bitch. You would, basically telling him that he'd be thrown in prison, and he would be the one that would be on the suffering end of torturous activity, But if I went back a little bit more, you would hear me actually say on the tape, you got 5 minutes left, John. I'm not fucking around with you. You got 5 minutes left. So if you want to prove to me that you're here, you have to do it now. Perhaps I should have left that part in the film, but I suppose it doesn't really matter, I guess. It was just interesting to me that whole time I felt like something big was coming, and then I got exactly what I wanted, which was that cushion being thrown. Now, what's also interesting about the cushion is it wasn't like, it wasn't feathers on the inside of the cushion. There was this non-stick bottom, and it was like this thick, rubbery foam that was inside the cushion. So the whole thing, I mean, it was very heavy. It was not, like it's heavy for a pillow. No, it was heavy. My guess is probably 20, 30 pounds maybe, the whole thing from end to end. It was about, 12 feet long, a good, couple inches thick, like there was weight to it. So once I stood up, and for about a good 5 seconds I was provoking before I felt it wrap around my leg, and that was after it was thrown at me, which in the dark I didn't see it thrown. You hear my, my really wimpy, I freak out. I go, fuck, or whatever I did, and I freaked out. And everybody laughed about that. If you look at the outtakes, you could see Kieran and Justin just dying laughing at me. That was definitely a bitch freak out. But the thing was, I could hear it moving, but I couldn't see it. Again, I'm in the dark. When we watch this footage, you could see everything, obviously, because, you're looking through, CCTV cams, but in the dark, you can't see anything. So all I could hear is the motion of it sliding. It was like it slid slowly and then just took off. And so you hear the shoo, like that. So that's what I heard. And I start kind of leaning backwards, and then I just felt something grab my leg, and it felt like an arm around my leg. And that's why you see me freaking out. In my mind, it felt like if I stood up, so imagine you're sitting at church in a church pew, and you know how below the seats it's wide open, because either side of the pew is anchored by the bottom of the pew, and then it's all open space below the pew that you're sitting. So it felt like if I stood up, if somebody reached out with their arm and just grabbed, around my ankle, like if they grabbed my ankle up to their elbow. That's what it felt like. So that is why I was startled like that and jumped back. Of course, why wouldn't I be? So for everybody out there that's been making fun of me about that, whatever, man. Let's see it happen to you guys and see how you respond. It was not my bravest moment, that's for sure. But anybody who says they don't freak out when they're ghost hunting, they are lying. It happens. But as you can see, after I got past being startled, I was stoked. I was fascinated because, believe it or not, at no time did I ever feel like I was in danger. And I realized the ghost of John Sage, is a, dark spirit. But I don't think that's what I encountered. Something really, really incredible happened. And I don't know if you guys put this together when watching the succession of events that happened. Okay? If you have a Blood Red Sky, go back and watch this over. Some really interesting points here that I don't think are laid out. In fact, I know they're not laid out in a row in the film. Now, if you go all the way back to the beginning, you'll remember that I fell asleep during the tour. So I didn't hear the history segment about Eleanor, the little girl spirit that reportedly resided in the chapel. And that's the only place in the entire castle that John Sage reportedly would not go to. So when I was in the chapel, as you guys know, I was yelling for John Sage to come to the chapel. So Eleanor, according to legend and lore, would have been in there with me, okay? Now, right before the cushion got thrown at me, there is a disembodied female voice that is heard in the movie. Now, this is not an EVP. If you look on everybody's face, you can see that everybody hears this, and it's a female voice, and Mary Beth's the only female in the room, and the camera's on her the whole time. And you hear a female voice with a strong accent, that kind of Cockney accent from that area, that kind of Scottish, English mixture. It says, "He's not there." Clearly, it says, "He's not there." Right after you hear "he's not there," you hear the door crack and open, in which Kieran looks over at the door and starts to point at it. And shortly after, I come running out all the way down to the ledge and say to them, "Did you see what just happened?" Now, if you apply what happened to legend and lore of Eleanor being alone in the chapel and John Sage being somewhere throughout the castle, if I am telling John Sage, come to the chapel, if I'm yelling, which I am, and I'm saying, "Come to me," it appears as though Eleanor tells my team he's not there, like informing my team, because I'm not listening. Eleanor is informing my team that he's not there, he being John Sage. I believe Eleanor was trying to get my team to tell me to stop calling out for John Sage, stop talking smack to John Sage, because if I continue, he's going to come to the chapel. And I think she also, after she said he's not there, I think she opened the door, because the door that opened led to the stairwell that if you kept going up that stairwell, it would have taken you right out at the top of those stairs was the chapel. So that is a mind-blowing series of events if you think about it all in context of the legend and lore. A young female girl's voice clearly says he's not there, then the door opens up to the stairwell that takes you to the chapel, where I am yelling and provoking John Sage, the one place in the chapel that Eleanor is supposed to reside and John Sage is not supposed to go. So that's what I think what was going on. I think Eleanor was trying to tell my team, get a hold of your boy. He's off he's off the tracks here. He's trying to bring John Sage here. My safety's blown. Like, he's got to stop. And I think she opened the door to guide the way as well. That was mind-blowing. One of the more mind-blowing things that I've ever experienced during a paranormal investigation, because it was so placated. I mean, she told them, John Sage isn't here. She didn't say John Sage, but he. There's only one person that Eleanor could be referring to. And the fact that the door opened to the stairway where I'm at, and then right after that failed, right after my team did not move, did not understand her message, did not go up the stairs, right after that happened, guys, the pew cushion gets thrown at me. So again, think about that succession of events. You know, I miss the information. I don't know what's going on. I go back to that room. I'm provoking John Sage. Eleanor says he's not there and opens a door for my team to come tell me that. They don't move, so she throws a pew cushion at me. Now, I know I've just said this 3 or 4 times, but that's because this is fucking amazing, guys. Like, this was like one of the most incredible things that I had ever seen. And I got to tell you guys, I was, there's, whenever you capture evidence, there's always that, side of you that says, well, maybe this, maybe it could have been this. I mean, I've literally captured evidence and talked myself out of it by morning, and sometimes a year later I'll talk myself out of it. But every now and then something happens that you know damn well was real, and you have zero doubt. I knew there is no possible way that I am sitting on this pew cushion and then I stand up and talk for like 5 seconds, and then this massively heavy 12-foot, sponge rubber cushion just rifles at me. I mean, there's not a chance in hell anything did that could be explained. That was a paranormal event. It's a type of event that makes me frustrated with the Michael Shermers of the world, the blanket skeptics that just say, this is impossible. It's like, and I get it until you've experienced it. You can't fully wrap your mind around it. But what I loved about that piece of evidence is I knew without a doubt there is no other possibility than paranormal. And I knew it instantly. There was just no way it could happen. So the next day, when Joey and Justin and Kieran, everybody's trying to figure out, what could it be? That's why I was like, hey, let's go up there. We can try any idea you want, And one of the funniest reactions was Joey's when he bends the cushion in the middle and he's kind of tapping it to see if it'll come off the cushion, which I don't know what he was trying, because even if it came off and fell to the ground, it's not going to rifle and throw itself at the velocity. That's the thing. If you watch the playback, the velocity of that thing, I mean, that cushion goes flying by like someone extremely strong just ripped at it. Like if someone stood at the end of the pew and just as hard as they could just jerked on it. But the crazy thing is, you can see that it wasn't jerked. It was thrown. Like it peels back. Like the top right-hand corner fires back over itself. Like it folds backwards and goes flying back towards me. So I just knew, And that was one of those really, really fun times where I was like, yeah, let's definitely go upstairs and let's definitely let you guys try to do whatever you want to do, man, because I know for a fact there is no solution to this. None. And that was such a pleasing event to me because I got exactly what I wanted to get. Exactly. The outcome that I wanted came in the final 5 minutes, which, if you remember, the earliest concept that I told you guys that gave me the idea for the Blood Red Sky experiments was when my father came out to see me play baseball. And after literally striking out twice the entire season in 40 games, only 2 strikeouts, I strike out 3 times in a row. When my dad comes to see me before my final at bat, which would be the final 5 minutes of the investigation, fate and destiny took over and I crushed the longest home run I had ever hit. And I remember rounding that first base and just thinking, what just happened? Like I knew something took over, something greater than me, something subconscious, but even stronger. It was like I willed it to happen, but without trying, if that makes sense. Like, I just, God, I know that doesn't make sense, but I didn't. I mean, of course I was trying. I was physically in the now, in the present, trying. But I remember seeing that pitch. I remember seeing the ball rotating off his fingers, and it was almost like everything slowed down, almost to a stop. And then I'm rounding first base. And what just happened? Whoa. It was like I didn't feel it. I didn't even feel the ball off the bat. This was kind of the same thing in Chillingham. Like, when that all happened, it was just kind of like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You know? And if you watch the film, you can hear me quietly kind of looking around the room, and you can see me, because I turned the camera on my face. I'm mentally dissecting what had happened, because the same as when I hit the home run, at the second that I actually felt the grab, it took me a few seconds to register, oh my God, something's around my feet. I heard it and I yelled, but it took a second. And that is, to me, the genesis of the Blood Red Sky experiment. What is that thing? What is that thing? Because it absolutely feels like we're making it happen. It feels like that. It really does. But having said that, let's take a step back here. Let's remove ourselves from just what I experienced, right? Because that's what I wanted. I wanted to experience something massive, and I did. So let's look at this in context of the experiment, okay? That was the question. If you want something and you believe it's going to happen, does your own thought process, your own subconscious, does that actually alter reality? Well, if you look, I wasn't the only one who experienced things. Exactly what I wanted became everyone's reality. Everyone's. He's not there, and the door opens. Not only am I experiencing incredible activity with the cushion being thrown at me, so are they. So are they. They're also experiencing paranormal activity, almost simultaneously. Which blew my mind again. If you go back and you look at each experiment, what every person wanted, they got. They got. Mary Beth just wanted sleep. What happened to us when we were watching her? I freaking fell asleep. We all were dozing off. Our reality was her desire. And she was so tired. Nothing happened. No activity. No activity in, any of the rooms that she went to. No activity in the HQ. Like nothing. When Joey was losing his mind, the castle was going crazy. Graham was talking about the front door was beating. We were hearing these massive movement sounds above our head. When Justin was, pissed and freaked out, bats were dive bombing him unlike they dive bombed anyone else. I mean, when Justin was up there, it was insane what those bats were doing to him. And you saw him, he was gritting his teeth, he was so freaked out. And then his camera started dying, almost like a countdown that mirrored his anxiety. It was crazy because we charged those cameras full every time before we left, and those had 12-hour battery reserves on them. 12 hours. And it didn't just drain like they do often in haunted places. It drained at a speed that right at the very end, for the 2 hours that he was up there, it just so happened to drain where it literally went dead right after he walked back into HQ. Now, if that isn't mind-blowing to everybody, it should be. That's incredible. And to be honest, at first, I looked at it only from the individual point of view, meaning what each of us wanted, subconsciously, we manifested. I wanted evidence, huge evidence. That's what I got. Mary Beth just wanted to go to bed. The way to do that is to have nothing happen and have her investigation end early because nothing is going on and we're falling asleep. That happened. Justin was completely anxiety-ridden, in which, bats around him started acting in that nature. his equipment started mirroring his personality and his emotions at that time. So I was like, okay, exactly how Justin felt is exactly what he experienced. And, Joey, if you think about, his experiment, it was crazy because he had the chemical alteration. And when he was freaked out, he experienced things. And as the chemicals changed his emotions, everything stopped. So everything seemed to be connected and tethered to the emotion. But it was Kieran who shocked me the most when Kieran said, "You're looking at this wrong. You're right in your thinking, in that individually you were experiencing what you wanted to experience." But he was like, but the big picture is so is everybody else. And that's what I was saying earlier. Like when Mary Beth just wants sleep, suddenly we're falling asleep. When I just want to experience evidence, suddenly everybody in HQ is experiencing evidence. When Joey is freaking out and running around the castle, and Justin is, just ripped with anxiety simultaneously. Not only are things, with Justin, like his camera representing his state of mind, but the castle itself is going crazy, from doors opening to knocking sounds, the heavy things, the sound of heavy things moving through the air. And I hate to describe it that way, the sound of heavy things moving through the air, but that's the only way I can describe it. And you heard the sound it made. It was like just something large sliding over the top of us. And Kieran was the one who pointed out that it's bigger than just the individual. It may very well be that each individual is manifesting their fate and their destiny, but it also appears that the strongest emotion that everybody's paying attention to becomes the overriding emotion that creates the fate and the destiny. Meaning, like I said, Mary Beth just wants to sleep. We're all falling asleep. When Joey's intense and things are happening around him, they're happening around us. When his chemicals in his brain are altered and now he becomes lighthearted and he becomes, very sincere, then suddenly, we're that way. Right down to when he came down and he was happy. We never again feared anything in that castle. I mean, other than me, running into the old man again, losing my shit. But we never did. Joey never ran again to his room. I never experienced a door open or a crack or a voice. Never heard the children singing. Like once Joey's anxiety was gone, so was ours. I think the question becomes, are we talking about something stronger than just mere influence? And that's up for you to decide. I believe we are. Absolutely. Mary Beth at the last second, as I said, changed her role. She said, "You do the ghost hunt, and I will do the sleep deprivation." The one thing that we know for sure is that changed the order in which we were going to do the investigations. That changed the experiment order. And by that one switch, that gave her time to talk to me about Joey and her basically telling me that she initially wanted me to call it off. But that also led to the conversation in which she decided to put wrappers around the pills. That switch that we made in the very beginning with her and I also led to her being alone with Joey in the room, which Joey asked her, what is going on? What was up with those wrappers? And when she said, I don't know. And he freaked out because he thought she might have been a part of it too, because she and I are very close. Those events led to Joey absolutely freaking out, and it led to me tracking him down and ultimately not having to make the decision to lie to him about the LSD. Because if you watch the movie, his freak out, when I go up there, what you guys don't see is he was trying to make himself puke. He was sticking his fingers down his throat, which to this day it crushes my heart because he was actually hurting himself. And that's where you see me grab him and just, what I'm doing is I'm calling it off. I'm trying to put my hands on him because there's a lot in a touch, like I said. And I'm trying to get him to see, okay, Joey, this has gone too far. Here's the truth. I was, never going to make you take anything you didn't want to take. I don't have LSD with me. That was never going to happen. But I was going to lie to you and tell you that you took it to see what happens if you believe it. But I didn't have to. I didn't have to. Which again, that's the Blood Red Sky experiment as a whole. That was the one thing the entire time that I dreaded, that I did not want to do. I did not want to lie to Joe. I did not want to lie to him. That shit kept me up at night because I had never lied to him, coming up to that moment. I'm not lied to any of my friends. And I was just like, God, I don't want to lie to Joey because Joey's very much like a little brother to me that's always looked up to me too. And I know that. And I'm not saying that out of like, oh, I'm the shit. I'm saying that because that matters to me. I cherish that. That he's somebody that looks to me to guide him and help him in life and protect him. And, so the thought of lying to him is something I never wanted to do. Well, had Mary Beth not changed roles with me, everything changes about what we experienced because the order in which we would do the experiments would have changed. It would have been a completely different set of circumstances had she not suggested that we make that change at the last second. It was that change that led to Joey freaking out, which led to me coming clean with him and telling him the truth. That although I was committed to telling him the lie, I did not lie. And man, that just meant so much to me in the end that I didn't have to lie to him. And we still had an incredible experiment, and I think we have a great starting point when it comes to chemical alteration. That is an area of this field that I felt it was important to take that initial step because over the course of time, whether it be Timothy Leary in a more formal, setting, or a Hunter S. Thompson on his own, experimenting, with the effects of drugs on the mind, it's a very important aspect of the paranormal field that everybody knows needs to be explored. But doctors and professors, like, they just can't touch it or they'll be done. But an independent filmmaker can. And I felt like, well, let's try to get something on record. Let's start somewhere. I mean, what Joey took was basically, a pain reducer that has mood modification. And he took another, drug that's basically a muscle relaxer. Now, I know those aren't like, that's not the same as him like, snorting blow or doing DMT, but it's a start. It's somewhere to show that when the chemicals in his brain were altered, what he experienced was altered. Which goes back to the Blood Red Sky experiment in the beginning, in which I'm begging the question, are the events that we experience in our life, are they connected to our emotions? Are they connected to our desires? And will those events change when our emotions and our desires change? And if they're changed through, drugs or medication, then what's exciting about that is that's something you can control. If you can have a specific outcome that is helpful to somebody, and we can determine that psychokinetic ability is real, and if you add this drug to a person, it opens up this part of their mind that allows them to heal themselves, that allows them to believe so much that they can heal themselves. Kind of like the flip side of hypochondria, right? Hypochondriacs, believe they're sick so intently that they start experiencing, ailments of that sickness. And we've already seen with the placebo effect the power of, if somebody believes they took a medication that'll help them, it's possible in certain people that they will start actually receiving those physical benefits from sugar pills. But what if there was a chemical of some kind that you can put into the body that would allow a part of your brain to open up and to work in a way where you can control your fate and your destiny? That's really what we're talking about here, the possibilities. Now, I know, there's a million places where people could say, well, this was flawed and that was flawed and you did this. And look, man, we started it. We brought someone independent and like Kieran to just watch and to not get involved and to just document what we did and tell us his honest opinion. And his honest opinion at the end of it, as you guys saw, was there's something here. There's something that, you hit onto. He couldn't make any final definitive anything, and, neither could I. But if you guys have seen me speak about a blood red sky at events, I always said this is a start to something. The end of a blood red sky was not the end of anything. It was the start of something. And there will be a blood red sky too one day. Thomas and I talk about this all the time, and I have a huge idea that I think would take this absolutely to the next level. The time is right, and the elements line up like these things do. There will be a part 2 to what's going on. And I'm not done talking about this one yet either. We still have a couple more episodes of some really cool stuff I'm going to talk to you about in relation to this experiment and what went down and what happened after when we went to Tutbury Castle, which on episode number 9, we will start there. And what occurred was very cool. And what happened when we got back home was even more interesting.